So my name's Kirsten Cummins, for those of you who are here, those of you who are joining. I am kind of what's left of the Intellectual Freedom Committee. There are others here, faces I recognize, who have taken this training. I would appreciate if you would join me in the very near future after this training, because I don't like being alone. And we can actually have like a formal election of a chair rather than me saying I am the chair of this committee. But because this is a very important topic and because it needs to be taught, I'm doing it. So here we are. I am not a teacher, however, I'm not certified. So I am relying on my many years of hosting pub trivia. I'm going to be your host for the next 2 hours. I know how to entertain people for 2 hours. And so that is what I plan to do. There we go. That's the thing that I was looking for. I have turned live transcripts on because I personally have developed difficulty in auditory processing. I have long COVID, and that includes brain fog, which includes auditory processing. It includes not being able to finish my sentences. I will blip out. You will see me all of a sudden pause, and I'll be like, content loading. So I appreciate your grace as I present this material. I am 75% of the woman I used to be when it came to my brain. Do you not see? Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. That's why. Ha 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 ha. Let's do the share screen so that you can see. Yes, share that. I said share. Admit. Share. There we go. Now can you see at the bottom that we have a transcript going? Thumbs up and or okay. Let's just get going. So my name's Kirsten Cummins. With me today, we have Susan Metzger. We also have the amazing Amy Rusk and Christy Frisky Daniels, who trained me many, many years ago. And from them, I procured a lot of the information I will be giving you today. And it is a lot of information. So if you have questions, write them down and hold on to them until the end. There will be a question and answer session at the end. They will help with those questions. I will help with the questions. There will be a pop quiz coming up very soon with one question that you can answer in the chat. But otherwise, let's just get going. Let's do this. I hope this works because it worked yesterday from beginning. Come on now. Intellectual freedom, what it means for you and your students and how to handle book challenges. And I want to add here that I hope no one's here to learn how to ban books. Because if you are, you should become a legislator. All right. Go again. And I'm all about the ooh-ah shiny, because there's nothing worse than a boring 2-hour meeting. Am I right? All right. So topics covered today. And notice at the top there, you do not have to join the Intellectual Freedom Committee, but you will have that option at the end. So we've got definitions, we've got the background of library Library Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, banned books from 2020, TUSD board policy, customer service with Amy and Christy, what happens when material is challenged, 5 historical instances from our districts, and RESPECT, what it means to thee. What is intellectual freedom? It is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. From here on out, the vast majority of my quotes come from the American Libraries Association, ALA website. Every individual. Oh, come on. Oh. I'm just going to skip that. It was the scene, you're all individuals. Yes, we're all individuals. All right, here's a comparison between book challenges and book banning. So a book challenge is the attempt to remove or restrict materials based upon objections of a person or group. And from here on out, we're going to actually be talking about challenges. That's what we mean, the attempt. Book banning specifically is the physical removal of said material. And that's related to censorship, which is a change in the access status made by a governing authority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of legalese here. But when we talk about book challenges, we're talking about attempts. Now, I am going to gloss over quite a few of these slides because I have quite a few slides, but you're going to get a lot of this information in your handouts in the end. And if you want, I can even send you this PowerPoint itself. Know your rights, the founding documents of TUSD's policy. We are talking about your rights as Americans, everybody's rights.
It's the law.
That's right, the law, specifically the First Amendment, speech and press. Freedom of speech leads to the right to receive information. 2 of our landmark cases were Lamont versus Postmaster General in 65, Board of Education versus PICO. There are other landmark cases. There's a whole handout about so many cases that went to the Supreme Court. Pop quiz, there's your pop quiz. First Library Bill of Rights was finally drafted in 1939 after what book was repeatedly banned and burned that year? So if you think you know what that book was, put it in the chat. I gave Susan the answer earlier and she can speak up once someone has guessed the book. Now, the Library Bill of Rights has been amended several times, last in 2019 with 7 articles. Those include library resources should be provided for all people in the community, which is in Article 1, and a person's right to use a library should not be denied because of origin, age, background, or Article 5. And oh, hey, the First Amendment has no age limit. That's right. That's actually been found in a landmark case. Yes, Susan, do we have a winner?
We have a winner.
Ooh, who's our winner?
Jill Kitchens gave us the Grapes of Wrath. That's the first person who came up with it.
Grapes of Wrath is correct. You win bonus imaginary points. Yes. And the Grapes of Wrath, yeah, so after a bunch of dithering, the American Libraries Association finally decided, after this book was burned and on the curb by Salinas Public Library, on the sidewalk in Bakersfield, it was banned by San Jose Public Library as unfit for patrons. So much went on with this book. There we go, admit. As being filled with profanity, lewd. It was obscene. We have, I love this over here, stable language. Oh my. We have the Associated Farmers saying that while we would not specifically want the book banned or suppressed, we would not want our women and children to read so vulgar a book. You know, so much pearl clutching on this book, right? But the American Libraries Association, or what they were known by at that time, decided finally to draft a library's Bill of Rights. And I want to add here that when I looked up, you know, what brought on the first library Bill of Rights, they didn't even speak up about Nazi book burning and all of that. You know, there was a whole bunch of, oh, you know, that's a shame. But no, it took this book. And this book was #1, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, the week it came out in fiction. And oh, look here as to what was #3 in nonfiction that same week. Yeah, Mein Kampf gives you some pause, right? But Grapes of Wrath did receive the Pulitzer for fiction the following year. So we're going to see that as times change, they also stay the same. What's the 411? So here we are with national stats. The most recent stats we have from the ALA are for 2020. And that's because they come out with these statistics for Banned Books Week in September the following year. So this last September was 2021, so their stats are for 2020. Here are the reasons for challenges. Take a look at these different reasons. You're going to see that it's from all across the political spectrum. Granted, we have some, you know, louder reasons. That's how these word clouds work, but you're going to see some very smaller things here, like homophobic content. Oh, there we go. That switched over to another one. Anyway, there were lots of different reasons going on. What got challenged? It wasn't just books. No, we had programs and meeting rooms specifically. We had social media. We had displays and photos. We had films and other. So other constituted filtering, access, databases, magazines, online resources, and our favorite right now, legislation. Oh yes, because when people go into power, that's what they do. Let's go here. Where do challenges take place? Surprise, surprise. Schools and their libraries made up 53%. And then another 43% public libraries, so that's 96%. 2% were academia, so universities, and the other 2% other, so government buildings, public parks, public art, that sort of thing. And finally, who initiated the challenges? Only 147 responses to this question. Not everybody wants to actually speak out when they report an instance of challenges or outright banning. Not everyone actually wants to fill out all the information because they're afraid of getting reported themselves. So this information is actually just a tiny chunk of what happens in our country. But 50% come from parents, 20% patrons, 11% school boards administration, 9% political religious groups, 5% librarians themselves or teachers, 4% elected officials, and 1%, that's actually very hard to see because it's the same color as the background, students. And now we get to us. So keeping it local about TUSD's policies. How we came about our policies. Now this lady here is Susan Dabbs. She's going to tell us about the beginning here. There we go. I was waiting for the video to load because it took forever. District policy is now based upon a combination of documents, the First Amendment, which I told you about, Arizona state statutes, Supreme Court rulings, and the TEA consensus agreement. But in the beginning, here's what we had or didn't have.
So you were a librarian at a time when this policy did not exist. And can you tell us about any number of incidents that led up to the creation of this policy? I seem to recall you speaking about an incident with one of our elected law enforcement officials.
Yes, I was at Peter Hall School at the time, which was just off of 5th and Alvernon. And I arrived at school one morning and I was always early and the principal was there ahead of me waiting at the door. And I thought, that's not good sign. And he said, Susan, we have to talk. And he walked me into his office and he closed the door and he said that he had been visited by this elected official that morning. And he at that point handed me a Judy Blume book, the only Judy Blume book ever really written for boys. It's called Anakin. And he told my administrator that that book or that librarian would be gone at the end of the day. And I was flabbergasted and I looked at the book and, recognized it immediately. And the person had highlighted all throughout this hardback book everything they thought was inappropriate in the book, which didn't make me a happy camper either. And so I said, well, what do we do? And he said, I don't know. And so I called library services and I said, this is what's happened and what do we do? And they said, on your own, we don't have anything in place. And I was shocked because, having recently come out of the library program, it was assumed that all of these things were in place with an employer, right? And so the day went on back and forth between the principal and me trying to figure out what would be appropriate or, what could we do, what couldn't we do? And I was getting angry as the day went on. And finally I went into his office and I said, I said, who's in charge of the school, you or him? Do you think you could walk into his office and say that employee will be gone by the end of the day? And it sort of appealed to his macho side or whatever. And he said, by God, you're right. And I marched on back to the library and that was the end of it. But it also was what started me saying to district level library people that something needed to be in place that was very solid, very clear, that removed the librarian from the pressure and removed the principal from the politics of it.
Now, you may be wondering if this entire presentation is just about libraries. It is not, because challenges come to curriculum, they come to materials that are from the library but used as curriculum. We're going to go into all of those details. But this started specifically, as Susan said, with library materials, and my background is in libraries, so that's why we are doing this starting with libraries. And as you saw, libraries get the brunt of the attacks, the challenges. But no, all of you teachers who may be wondering, am I in the right place? Yes, you are.
Oh, Kirsten, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I didn't catch the name of the book that she was talking about.
Maybe then I won't, or something like that.
Okay.
Or then again I won't, something like that. Okay. Why having a policy matters. So we are going to hear the difference between when your job is threatened but you have a policies, TUSD, versus a district that does not have a policy, and she does not name the district, but she heard about it. So here we go. Susan Dabbs is a font of information, and I am lucky to have these videos courtesy of Christy and Amy, who you will meet later on. They have their own little section in here. But here we go with why it's good to have a policy.
There have been more than one time when I felt my job was on the line with this, having hearings at other times in the district. There was one time when they walked in with 2 sheriff deputies and said that I would be placed under arrest at the end of the hearing for having materials harmful to a minor, because there is a Harmful to Minors Act. And, it's just things that happen, and when something like that happens, you freak, but you also realize that's the reason you spend all the time working on solid policy with the right people behind you, because it really is an idle threat when things are set up appropriately.
That's right. And then when you don't have a policy.
You were not only involved and the chair of the Intellectual Freedom Committee for the district, but you were also held that same role for the state of Arizona, for the Arizona Library Association.
Correct.
So I know you've heard it all.
Yes, I've heard from people who do not have a policy in place and are panicked because they can't even buy groceries in their small community. The store will not sell to them.
Now wait, tie that.
Well, we have a policy that basically says the principal needs to be the principal. This committee is handling it. His job, go let him be principal. This librarian needs to be librarian to the other kids in the school, right? This matter is removed from their purview. Do not involve them. There is a committee in place, there is a procedure in place, and life needs to go on as normal. Well, when you don't have this, it's a matter of politics and jockeying and intimidation and all these other factors that can get really ugly. And I remember one woman calling me and, sobbing and asking me what to do and everything else. And she was her Prescott ballot, and she had to go to another town to buy her groceries. They were not letting her buy groceries.
All right. Oh. Okay. We're going to hear about the First Amendment and scrutiny and how it relates to library materials, curriculum, et cetera, and how that pertains to policy and how it fits in. And FERPA.
Right, this is correct. This is not, and the difference that the Supreme Court has made in finding distinctions on First Amendment is that there's something called content neutral. And content neutral just means we don't care if it's Rush Limbaugh or Howard Stern. Putting in a loudspeaker at TMC Hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning is inappropriate. Go someplace else. Right? We don't care what the content is. Okay? So that's content neutral. And then content based has 3 levels of scrutiny. And one, the level that has no scrutiny, is what's called no scrutiny, which is is like the insightful word. You can't scream fire at a sailor who's on radio silence in a submarine during wartime can not say, but I promised my girlfriend to call her, it's her birthday. Okay. There is no scrutiny. Child pornography falls under that too. And then in the middle is false commercial claim.
Oh, I am so sorry. In the middle is false commercial claims.
Right, this is, and then strict scrutiny, which means you best. And then in the middle is false commercial claims and curriculum, because you do not have necessarily the choice. You are being told to read something. I see. Okay. Then strict scrutiny, which means you better have the finest, biggest, best reason in the world to tell someone they don't have the right to individual life. A library book is a person's right to pick and to choose what they want, which is another reason why the courts have found that a parent or administrator doesn't have right to a child's library keepers. It all goes back to the First Amendment and being there under strict scrutiny. And a lot of people will think that FERPA, a parent can come in because of FERPA, but I went to the U of A, to the law school, to Rogers Law School there, and talked to the First Amendment lawyer about it because I was getting conflicting messages. And he said FERPA specifically says things that are permanent in their record, such as their courses, their grades, their discipline actions, all of these things that are kept in a folder, permanent folder that follow the kid from year to year. And library records do not. When Chuck comes in, he checks them out. In the old days, it was on a card. You would have to go through every book in the library to find their name on a card. And nowadays, most computerized systems, when you check a book in, the record is dissolved. So there is no permanent record.
Yep. Okay, now we go on to the next slide. And finally, why a library patron's borrowing record is confidential. So she just talked about that, but here we are with Arizona Revised Statute 41-151.22 applies to students as well as public library users, privacy of user records, exceptions, violations, classification, except as provided in subsection B, blah, 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 blah. Records may be disclosed if necessary for the reasonable operation of the library, and I made that asterisk red. This is why we can send home overdue notices and ask for help in the return or payment for lost items from administration. And then we have, on written consent of the user, on receipt of a court order if required by law. Those are the only times records may be disclosed, right? And then it says any person who knowingly discloses any record of other information in violation of this section is guilty of a class 3 misdemeanor. And so that is why we do not give patron use records out to administration. So unless it is necessary for the reasonable operation of the library or there's a legal reason, patron use is confidential. There is no huffing and puffing and blowing your house down about it. TEA consensus and you. Specifically chapter 17, 1 and 2. So academic freedom, that is, I'm not going to read all of this, but academic freedom means that teachers can teach what they want as long as it's not illegal and it supplements the actual curriculum. It says, freedom shall be guaranteed to member bargaining units, teachers, within the district's instructional program, and no limitation shall be placed upon the study and investigation of facts and idea except where contrary to statute or board policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Kirsten,
Yes?
would that still apply to people who aren't actually in the union?
That's a good question for later. I did anticipate that question, and hold on to that. And then 17.2 is for materials, specifically library materials. This goes on, this is where we get the flow chart that I'll go through later, but all complaints regarding the use of any such material shall be submitted to the superintendent or designee in writing, the designee being library assistant, librarian, library media specialist, whatever the library professional's title is. A committee will be formed, et cetera, et cetera. Letter D is the most important thing. This is true regardless of whether it is classroom material or library material. Any disputed materials shall remain in use in the district until district takes formal specific action to remove those materials. That's right. Any material that is in question that is being reviewed, even if the review committee, they're all reading said book on their own in the time frame given, if it is being questioned at, say, Lineweaver, it's still on the shelf at Lineweaver. It's right there. Okay. So this is a sort of CYA clause for the library staff there. And then why consensus overrules policy, if you will. This cannot be changed. Sorry, I have part of my screen is covered, but it cannot be changed unless both parties agree to meet, confer, and possibly change, and there's or a state statute that makes part of the agreement illegal. Oh, wait, there's more. Back in Article 2 of consensus, can't be discriminated against, et cetera, if there is a state statute that does go against what's in here, the association and district shall immediately reopen negotiations for the purpose of arriving at a mutually satisfactory replacement for such provision. And I saw something else earlier that I should have highlighted, but it says somewhere in here that this constitutes board policy. There we go. This agreement constitutes officially adopted board policy for the term of said agreement. Boom. Right there. Finally, we have governing board policy, library material selection and adoption, code IJL, and we've got how to select, responsibility for selecting, and down here at the very bottom, well, not very bottom, but these last paragraphs, professional library staff with input from faculty, parents, and students will select materials for libraries for purchase. Will evaluate the existing collection, the school's curriculum, and needs of the school community. School staff members, students, parents, and other school community members may request that certain materials be considered for either addition to or removal from the collection in accordance with district policies and regulations. And up here it says excluding textbooks and supplementary materials. Just as Susan Deb said earlier, there's a slightly different thing about curriculum. We're going to find out later why there is and who made that distinction. I do go a bit back and forth because there's so much. Let's go back to the other PowerPoint. Susan asked me if I can turn the volume up on those videos. Sadly, I can't. That's actually why I put closed captioning on YouTube as they're playing, because that's all I got. I have it on max for both my laptop and on the YouTube.
Kirsten, can you choose share computer sound when you share your screen? That would make it louder.
Let me see. Resume share. And where would that be?
When you first click screen share and it brings up those options, there's one little box to tick that says share computer sound. And then it comes directly from your computer. Thank you so much for checking.
Kirsten?
Share sound. Okay, let's see if that works. I found it. Yes?
I was going to say, usually, sometimes people have to stop share and then start it up again, but you found it, so we're good.
Yes. Okay, let's see if that works. And if not, like I said, oh, someone's trying to get into the building. Okay, someone got that. All right, so what happens when a complaint is made? No matter what's going on, whether it's curriculum, a library book, a video, piece of art, what have you, they all start the same. Concerned person attempts to resolve the concern directly with teacher, with library person, whomever. If that doesn't work, concerned person goes to the site administrator. If that doesn't work, site administrator determines which TUSD board policy applies. What then? Choose your path wisely. So the TLDR, it depends. Is it strictly curriculum? As in, is it board approved? Is it a textbook, et cetera, et cetera? Is it strictly library material? Did it come directly from the library? Is it pleasure reading, in the kids' hands? Or is it a combination of the two, library books used for a classroom assignment? So regardless, there's always a form to file. But hopefully you haven't even gotten to this point, because just talking to the person can resolve what their issue is. But let's go on to the first instance. This is the curriculum one. Board policy KE for members of the public, used for situations not covered by other employee agreements, district policy, or state laws, concerns whether we're teaching our students CRT, evolution, et cetera, et cetera. And there we go. Grievance submits a written statement to the supervisor of involved employees or the site administrator expressing concern and requested remedy. The supervisor, that's going much slower than I thought it would, but the supervisor requests a written statement from involved employees, there we go, and delivers a written determination to grievant. And then finally, grievant can appeal to next administrative level and ultimately to the superintendent, whose decision is final. Next, come on. Next. Thank you. Library materials and how their challenges differ by use. So library materials, when they are solely library materials, the policy is called IEP JK, library programs. On the left here, for any parent, teacher, student, or community member concerned about library resources chosen independently or available on shelves. So again, this is after the fact, after the person's come to you and said, I'm really concerned about this book. I do not like the pictures in it. I don't think it's appropriate. If talking to them has not worked, if going to the principal, they're still not happy, if they want to fill out the form, right? Principal or designee explains selection policy, explains consensus 17.2, which we went over. If not resolved, principal or designee gives concerned person the library resources review form to fill out and report incident to intellectual freedom chairperson, who is yours truly right now. Upon receipt of completed form, chairperson proceeds with formal challenge process. Chairperson convenes committee, follows procedures, provides concerned person and all people involved a written reply within 15 business days. Within the next 5 business days, chairperson files all written records. And that's the end of that. Versus review process for library materials used in the classroom. Governing board policy IJR. So we do not like this class set of books that happen to be from the library. Administrator explains and follows procedures, which include the parent files a written complaint and requests the child be withdrawn from class, and the principal sends a written reply to the parent within 3 business days. There could be more after that, but that's generally the gist of it. Who we thank for all of these policy? Fred Lindsicke. Oh, let me see if coming back. Come back, Birdie. I love that one. Are you going to play for me now? It doesn't want to play. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see if these videos will play. All right. Well, Fred Lindsicke, he made those distinctions regarding no, curriculum is different and library books are different and we got to make them separate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's the one who actually made those very clear distinctions, and he's the one who gets the applause that I put on that slide. All right. And our policies stand up in court. And here are 2 very specific examples. This is a federal case that actually applied to MAS and their formation, the Mexican American Studies Department.
Because of the ruling, the 1994 ruling.
The Hasso Alvarez
Okay.
lawsuit. What happened was that, you know, I'm minding my own business at home, and of course the district is in this legal battle or legal workings, trying to straighten out and make sure that they are meeting all of the federal guidelines and lawsuits and everything else that have to do with equity. And they are all prepared and they go to court, and Judge Marquez, being as wise as Solomon, looks at everything they brought and says, and how do you handle your libraries? And I received a phone call from Becky Montaño, who was an assistant superintendent at the time. And she said, what do we have? And I said, well, what we have is a collection development policy that talks soup to nuts about libraries and includes the review procedure, a copy of the consensus agreement that protects us. Everything is all in this binder. And so I had to drive over with the binder, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and drop off this binder. And it was taken to court as TUSD's documentation on how libraries are handled. So that, with Fred saying when a legal entity takes something to court and says, this is our proof, this is what we do,
Then it gives it more
then
teeth.
it gives it legal standing.
And this is that binder. That's right. I have that binder and it is heavy. But it is all you need to know on how to run our libraries. All right, second video here. When the state superintendent of public instruction in 2006 tried to go after the book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Oh, yeah. Perks of Being a Wallflower was more recent. I had retired and had been brought back as interim library coordinator when the state superintendent for public instruction from the Department of Education requested to school districts that they pull the book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I received a phone call from my direct supervisor to please come to her office, and I did. And she, handed me this letter basically saying, have this book pulled from our shelves. And I said, it's not the way we do things, you know what I mean? And consensus 17.2 is very clear
Right.
that is not the way we do things. So we have two things. We have policy, and then we have our consensus agreement, and they dovetail. And I explained the procedure, which sort of saddens me that administrators go through their administrative process without being educated on the process. And I explained the process, that the form is filled out, the committee is brought together, that committee reviews, it's an open meeting, anyone can attend, and the decision is made at that time. And then the decision is written up by the chair and then passed on to the superintendent, because this committee is the designee. And she said, well, it wasn't she who wanted it. It was the superintendent that felt he had to because of the letter. And I said, then he needs to fill it out. And I said, and you need to realize that when a book challenge happens, it is not a district-wide decision, because every school is different. One school may have GATE, one school may not. One school may be a K-3, one school may be a 5-8. So every situation is different. So if there's 13 copies of this book in the district, there has to be 13 hearings.
Right.
And so she said, well, he is not going to sign that complaint. And I said, then the book is not getting a hearing and the book stays on the shelf. I said, you can file it, a student can file it, a parent can file it, any of us can file it. Somebody has to file it. No filing, no hearing, the book is not guilty.
Wow. Do you know of any school district in the state of Arizona that pulled that book from the shelf?
I don't, but I don't specifically, but I know there are school districts where there is absolutely no attempt at intellectual freedom. A local school district here, the principal just walks in when there's a complaint, pulls the book off the shelf, does not check it out, and that there's nothing to discuss.
Wow. Okay.
So our policy has really protected us for years and years and years.
Right.
And
Current bills in state legislature. Now, these ones are only two of several. And like I said earlier in this presentation, if you want to ban books and do that, become a legislator. Yeah. So HB 2439 pertains specifically to school library books and parental review. And when I got called by Lillian Fox earlier, I want to say last month, regarding this, she asked me, what do you think about this bill going through? I said, I think it's unconstitutional. because I've been working on this and I've been through the training and everything. But the thing is, these bills, they can be proposed, they can be drafted, they'll go through committee after committee after committee and hyped up, and then they'll go to a different committee, and then they'll be voted on here, and then they'll go back and forth and back and forth. And sometimes they become state law, like we've seen in Florida recently, and sometimes they don't. And this just shows that attacks on academic and intellectual freedom can come from anywhere, including state legislature. In your handouts, as I said earlier, there are landmark cases that went to the Supreme Court of the US. There are cases that don't get that far. They go to circuit court, they go to, state court, but it happens and it's still happening. So we have to remain vigilant. And that's what I got to say about that. There are other bills. These are just two highlights. There's one other thing I have to say. Parents who are actually involved in their kids' academic careers already know that they can look at their kids' curriculum. It's already posted online. It's already available to them. Anyway, moving on. Do we need another break? You guys can speak up if you want another break. I feel like that was a very short time between breaks. Let me know. Or thumbs up or what have you. Yes, no?
Few in
I'm
the
seeing
chat.
heads shaking. Pardon?
Most people in the chat that I'm seeing that they don't need a break. They're fine.
Great. Let's move on then. I was anticipating that section would take longer. So let's move on. Fabulous. All right. Every book will have its day. It's true. So now the nitty-gritty. How to handle these challenges and what happens after. Amy and Christy, it's your turn. Are you ready? Yes, no?
Oh, you mean,
Wait, can you hear us now?
I'm not the only Christy.
Oh,
Oops, sorry.
Yes, Amy and Christy, we can hear you now.
Okay,
Thank you,
let me
Susan.
pause my share. All right, should be on you now.
okay.
Okay, super.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much. That was excellent. We really just wanted to start with what happens when someone comes to you and says, I want this book out of your library. And I wanted to start by speaking about that because in my job now, I should back and say my name is Amy Rusk and I'm Library Services Manager with Payne County Public Library. But I was a librarian at Tucson High for 21 years and Johnson Primary for 3 years. And Christy and I co-chaired the Intellectual Freedom Committee for I think 7 years. And in my job now, I spend a lot of time talking to people who are frustrated with something that's going on in the library. And so you can see that our communication skills cheat sheet, we start with this idea of listen beyond words. Really, the process can actually stop at this step if you're willing to really listen to someone. Listening with curiosity and non-judgment, and listening like you have all the time in the world. And I think that's really important. We are really, really busy, and it is hard to just take time out to really focus on someone and let them tell their truth.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm
Can you talk louder?
Oh,
Yeah, we can't see ourselves, so.
I'm so sorry about
Please
that.
do it again.
That's
Please do it again.
better. Go closer to the
All of
speaker. That was
Closer
better.
to the speaker. Okay. Okay. Is that a little bit better? I don't even know what you heard. And so I'm terribly sorry. I was saying that in my job as a library services manager, I oversee 9 libraries, public libraries. And so anytime a customer is upset, I receive that call. And I just really believe that this whole process a lot of times can stop before it gets started if we are willing to really listen to that person who has the complaint. I think that all of us just want to be taken seriously. And even when you feel like you want your jaw to just drop, you can't believe that someone wants whatever the book is out of your library, you really have to suspend that disbelief and listen. Christy.
Yeah, and so again, just go back to your, basic, any training you've had in really good communication skills. One thing you don't want to do with them, don't set up an adversarial relationship. Like, listen and, begin with I messages. I can see that you're really, really frustrated. I would really like to help you. How can we go about this? Or I hear what you're saying. One thing we've been warned against saying is I understand, because sometimes you don't understand, and that might trigger a false, like they're being mocked, and you don't want to trigger any defensiveness. So, just again, listen. If you can really, really empathize with them, sure, say I understand. But just practice your I messages rather than say, oh, well, you want to take the book out of the library. No. Okay. So again, just use your I messages.
Yes, and of course, yeah, never start talking about why the book should stay. Yeah. And we have to really think about our nonverbal communication. When something happens that you're upset about, it's really, really natural to close yourself off, to cross your arms, and a great time to keep a friendly gaze, keep your palms open, to maybe lean in. Just be aware of what your body is signaling to that other person, and nodding your head as you are listening intently. Anyway.
Yeah. And tell the person, you really want to work with them. You're not their enemy. You don't have to say you're not their enemy, but affirming, like, okay, let's see what we can do about this. Say this person, it's not this person's first attempt, and maybe they got treated poorly and the person they spoke to prior to you. So, offer an apology, like, I'm sorry you weren't treated or you weren't listened to. It's okay to say I'm sorry, and you can suggest a start over. Let's begin fresh. Another thing, just so you don't intimidate or, watch your jargon. Well, I'll turn you over to an LA. What's an LA? Don't use jargon that may flow off your tongue. Make sure you are very descriptive in what you're saying, but also watch your sarcasm, watch your tone of voice, ask questions, if you're curious about something or if it's not clear, and be, with them and listen to them to such a degree that you're able to paraphrase and go ahead and do it. Okay, what I hear you saying is blah, 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 blah. So what else, Amy? Oh, yeah.
I think it's really important if you have this paperwork handy, right? So if someone, you've talked about their options and someone says, well, yes, I want to go forward with the challenge, then great. You have the paperwork right there. By the way, you have to read the entire work and fill out these questions, and we'll meet it. And sometimes getting to the formal paperwork and explaining that somebody has to read the whole work, whether it's Grapes of Wrath or it's a children's book, and that you will be sitting with a committee. Sometimes that's enough for a person to say, well, no, I'm glad that you heard me out, but we don't need to go through with this. And that really did happen with the two of us at Tucson High several times.
Yeah, and on the paperwork, it has options. And at this stage, you can kind of explain, well, if you'd like to follow through with the challenge process on it, it will say, oh golly, do you want your child to just not be able to check out the book? Or do you just want to express your opinion? Or, it's got some options on there that are on the screen in just a second. And then there's further options when once the committee takes it on.
Back to the body language.
Yeah.
Really important. And I don't think any of you would do this, but don't ever point someone or tell a patron to calm down, because that is the perfect way to get them more fired up.
Yeah.
And
the best way is just for you to stay really, really calm and, and gracious and open to hear what they have to say. And that really, they'll begin oftentimes to mirror that frame of mind. So
we're so fortunate to have Susan Dabbs and all the people that have come before us to have a process, so that we're not in the position of defending the book in that moment. We're not, no, there is a process. So we don't have to be so emotionally involved in that moment.
yeah. And as Susan, impressed upon us, don't defend the book, defend the process. And the process keeps everybody out of trouble. Which is good.
Exactly. All right.
That's it?
Do you all have any?
Kirsten? Oh, yeah.
If there are any questions? Yeah.
Well, I think you had some really good points, but it was so hard to hear. You may, if you can like go to the microphone, or if you are sharing a computer, if you can just talk louder or go closer to the laptop, because I only got half of what you said, and I know you've got some really good stuff to say. So I don't have a question, but I think your empathy and towards the person who was grieving the book is pretty good. I hope it's all in the PowerPoint or somewhere else where I can read it.
Yeah.
I'll speak up and say that it is actually on a sheet, one of the many handouts that you will receive later. Yeah.
We so apologize for technical difficulties, really.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is, but anyway, we'll work on it for next time.
What was that, Christy?
Oh, we apologize for the technical difficulties.
Yup. Okay. But yes, it is on one of the many, many handouts I have. Yeah, you're going to be inundated. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get back. I actually don't have very many slides left of this. So and here is that concern form. It's actually, I copied and pasted it. It looks far more formal, if you will. But so this is after the parent or community member has come to you and talking with them just has not worked. They really want to write about the material. And there are other things on the form, but at the very end, it's what would you like the Library Resource Review Committee to do about this item? Do not check it out to my child. They absolutely have the right to say that my child may not check out this particular book. And the library professional with whom they speak can put that in the patron record. No one else has to know about that. All good. No problem. Withdraw it from general circulation at this school. Well, we already know we don't do that, but it would end up going to review committee and maybe it will be moved to another school library. We'll go to some historical instances to find out how often that has happened. Have it formally reviewed. That sort of dovetails with B. Just to express my opinion. Maybe they wanted in writing that they express their opinion. That's great, no problem. No other action necessary, no problem. And F, other, anything else they want to say. All right. Once library material has been formally challenged, and a committee consists of one administrator from the level at which the book was challenged. So let's say elementary school. Must be an elementary school administrator then, if it's at an elementary school library or classroom. One librarian or library assistant from that same level, one teacher from the same level, and 2 parents from the same level. And yes, I know there's more than 5 people in that picture. Now, all of the people on the committee will have received a copy of the statement of concern. They will have read or viewed the material in its entirety, not just what was concerning about the material, but all of it, because they are judging it as a whole. All of its merits, or rather strengths, as you see here, all of its weaknesses. And then after a time has elapsed, the 15 days, they will come together and talk and discuss all their viewpoints and then vote.
Kirsten,
Yes,
if I could say one thing, can you hear me all right?
kind of, sort of.
Oh, no. Okay. Just if you want to mention that all of the committee members need to have gone through the training. That's
Yes.
what we said. Okay.
All committee members need to have gone through this training. Now, thank you, Christy. I just found out from Susan this morning that this training is not only being recorded as they always are, but it's going to be available on True North Logic as an asynchronous training. So anyone who wanted to take it today but couldn't, or anyone who wants to take it later, they can. They do not have to have been here, right now, and this is the only time ever. So that's great. But in order to serve on a review committee in the future, they have to have taken this training. Now, this is the voting form that they will fill out, and everyone around the room will have voted, but there are 2 parents for a reason, and Susan Dabbs is going to explain that.
And it was when we set up the procedure, we made sure that it had representation from the community, librarians, and teachers and administrators, so that it would be a balanced group. And there were always to be an odd number of people, and the last person to vote was always to be a parent, so that if there was ever the need for a tiebreaker, the tiebreaker came from a parent, not from a TUSD
That's right.
employee.
So nobody who has any stake in the matter, if you will have that tiebreaker vote. And there have been some tiebreaker votes. I actually have a big old box here. Think a banker's box. To my left, I've been gifted all of the files that date back to the 80s, mid 80s, 90s, no, mid 80s. All of the books and materials that have been challenged in the district. And I went through them because I was curious. And there have been some tiebreakers. So, yeah. So here are 5 TUSD examples. Art for art's sake is the most famous one, and I say famous because it went national in 1994-ish. It was at an elementary school, and it was a parent who initiated it. It was removed and then returned, and it has its own video. Ooh.
But there was a time, right, where your arm was twisted a little bit by the district because the district did not have in place a policy to review curriculum. What happened then? I mean, can you go back and give me a little history on that one?
Even though 17.2, the consensus says that there is a committee for curriculum and a committee for libraries, the library committee went forth. The curriculum part never happened. And there was a school on the west side, and I cannot remember the name of the school, but it was an elementary school on the west side, and they had received an EEF art grant. And children in the school who were talented were recommended by their teacher for an after-school program. And the parents were given the form explaining the program, and they had to sign off to let their child stay after school for the program. And a U of A art student was the one hired to do the program. She bought the books at Bookman's, she bought art prints, she went to the museums and libraries and borrowed things, and she had what she thought was going to be this fabulous art program for children. And one of the young students went in, and there were pictures of nudes in the room from the masters. And he went home and said, "Mom, there's pictures of naked ladies." Okay. And so she went down and objected. And the principal said, you know, there is a policy, but the principal was remembering the library policy and not curriculum policy, and said, you can't do it this way, da-da-da-da-da. So she went down to the district to talk to the associate superintendent, Jean Benton at the time, about the materials, and was, you know, totally verbose about her complaint. And so he escorted her back to school and stood at the door of the room that had been assigned for this project and said, you know, "Give me everything you object to." And she took every book and every painting out of the room. So in essence, negating this project. And of course, then everything broke loose because that was not a way to handle it. And what ends up happening was that they then had to have a hearing for each one of these items as if they were a curriculum complaint, but they had no curriculum stuff in place. And they called me and said, would we do it? And I said, absolutely not. I said, so, you know, it's very clear. First Amendment law separates curriculum and libraries. What applies to curriculum, I can't address. They've never been trained. Nobody, there's different stuff here. You can't mix the two.
Right.
Which is what Mr. Linzicki had been explaining to us. And so I said, no. I said, because I've assured them that they're not going to do anything but library because that's all they've been trained to do. And I received a phone call back from Dr. Montaño saying, we need you to do it this one time. It has to get settled because this was national news. And we went around and basically I was told, your committee will do it. And then we will figure out the curriculum piece. And so it was it was on the school board podium, and my poor 5 people were up there, and and people were screaming and yelling, and the news was there, and television cameras were there, and people were saying, well, if getting naked is all right, let's just all get naked, you know, and it was just one of those really, really ugly, really, really bad situations. And it was interesting because the administrator who was on the panel came up to me afterward and apologized for requesting for agreeing with the parent that one of the pieces of art, a tri-panel on death, was inappropriate. should not have been there. And I looked at him and I thought, I did not explain to you what our process is, apparently, because you should feel perfectly comfortable with saying that item doesn't belong. That's what you're there for.
Exactly.
You are not there to rubber stamp everything. You are there to say, I'm an educated person, I understand the issues, I've looked at the evidence, and this is what I feel should happen.
There you go. That's why there's an entire committee made up of different people of different levels. So other examples, eventually everything was returned after this process. One art piece, and it may have been that particular one, did have a divided outcome, one of those tiebreakers, but it did get returned. Everything was returned, and the child themselves was removed from the class because this was an elective. It wasn't even a regular class. And so that's why that particular policy that we went over earlier is a parent needs to write to withdraw their student from the class. That's why that's in there. This is that example that brought about that particular policy. So another example here, we've got New Dictionary of American Slang. It was found in an elementary school. An administrator brought it up because many slang terms are not appropriate for young children, the administrator found, and the committee agreed. And it was rehomed within TUSD. It was actually moved up 2 levels to a high school. So it was not banned, it just went to another library. It's still in TUSD. I actually have a copy of it here in my library. So yeah, there are actually, to my knowledge, only 2 instances where a book was rehomed and moved up a level from, say, elementary to middle or something like that. And this was one of those instances. Push by Sapphire, which became the movie Precious. That was at a high school, and it was another administrator who said this book does not belong. The language is filthy, and this is inappropriate. And the committee said it should remain. Yes, we agree that the language is, not how we speak at home, but this is what kids read. So you can draw manga, middle school, and it was an SRO, school resource officer, and their concern was that the pictures were of the women, they were a little too, shall we say, risque. The committee looked at the entire book as a whole and said, no, this is appropriate for middle school, though not for elementary. There was someone who was like, I wouldn't put this in an elementary school, but for middle school, this works. But we do understand the concern that the SRO had for these particular pictures, yes. And you can't scare me. Many times scary stories type books, and especially these scary stories or more scary stories and to tell in the dark and all that, oftentimes those anthologies get challenged. So this is one. You can't scare me. At an elementary school, it was a grandparent who came forward and they said this goes against the teachings of our child at our house. And the committee said this is appropriate for elementary reading level, though we do understand that it's not appropriate for this child, going by what they are taught at home, religious teachings, but it still is appropriate for an elementary library.
Do you know if in that case the grandparent had opted to say, hey, could you just make sure my child can't check out this book? Do you know if that happened?
Do I know what? If they made that choice?
Yeah, so the book remained in school, but did they say, hey, could you just make sure that my child can't check this out?
Oh yeah, they absolutely have the right to say that their child cannot. And so they would, I don't know if that happened, but in this case, should this something like this happen again, and it happened to me when I was at a middle school. A parent came to me, my child may not check out books by this author. And so in the program Destiny, you can actually put a patron note in that only shows up to you or whomever is checking books out. And when the patron, the child in this case, comes up, ding, there's the note. Child may not check out books by author, blah, blah, as per parent/guardian, and then the initials of the library worker, library assistant. So while I don't know if the grandparent in this case did make that decision, they absolutely have that right. And we are almost at the end. Just one more thing, actually two more things. RESPECT, of the process of your community and of your patrons. You don't always know why someone objects to material, so respect for them is key.
You think you know why someone is going to object to a book, and then you find you don't. A prime example was the district used to have a courier that would bring things that were of an urgent matter. He drove things from one place to another in the district all day. And I received a phone call as the committee chair saying that they had a complaint for a book called Panda. And it was an elementary level picture book, and that they were bringing the complaint over. And so I checked in my card catalog, because those were the days of card catalog, and I did have a copy of Panda at the library, and I went and I got it, and it took me 5 minutes to read the book. It was a gorgeous Japanese watercolor, or Chinese, I guess, I don't know, anyway, whatever, watercolor artist who had done the book. And in the book, there was a page about mating, and I thought, oh, well, we know what the complaint is. Okay, and I finished the book, And then when the complaint came, I was with kids, so when the kids were gone, I opened up the complaint to look at it, expecting to see that page, and instead what I found was the parent's complaint was no evidence of a lasting relationship after mating. And so, instinctively, Christy, that's exactly what people want to do. You want to, probably there's a 50-50 split between the complaint being something that you're saying, we need to think about this, or being a lasting relationship after mating on a panda bear.
Right.
And so you always have to remember that you are representing a bigger entity than yourself, or the 5 people at the table, or even the district. You are representing the right to read, and the right to view a concern, and the need for being respectful.
Right.
And that you take every complaint as seriously as the next. Someone felt it was important enough to be concerned, to take the time to fill out the form. You took the time to have a committee form. They took the time to read the material. Everyone needs to treat it with the utmost respect. And I think that's a big part of why the process has been so successful. I remember there was one, we always hope that the librarian sitting down with the parent can rectify it before it ever gets to written complaint. It's not, I don't want to talk to you, here's the form. It should always be a nice discussion before, but I know that when one of the hearings was over, and even though the book was voted to be retained in the school, which was not the person's request, when the hearing was done, she said, "I want you to know, if I had been treated with this level of respect at the school level, we would not be here."
Wow.
And I think that's number one, is to remember.
Right. A good lesson.
Very good lesson.
And finally, we're here for the kids is not just a cliche.
And it all goes back to having some trust in a librarian, knowing that we do have everything. It is our job to have everything, because everybody is different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I can remember when I was at Tucson High, a very, very well-known student athlete, and she took out a book called Annie on My Mind, which is about a girl discovering that she is probably a lesbian, and her friend Annie is always on her mind. And she came up to me after she read the book, and she's just very, very quiet. She took it out of her backpack and she passed it to me, and she said, "I don't know how to find more books like this."
Oh, that's interesting. The way she said it is interesting.
"I don't know how to find more books like this." And I said, "Well, we'll go to a computer and I'll show you how to find them."
Yes.
You know, and I did, and that was it. And she would only check out from me.
Right.
You know, she'd hang around, and then I'd realize, oh, I know why she's waiting.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
And so you have to have something for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
We're a diverse culture in a
Yes.
diverse district, and we have all of their protections in place and have had them for many years, and they continue to work.
And that's that. I want to thank, even though she's not here, Susan Dabbs, whose videos gave so much information and background. Beth, who should be amongst the participants here, she gave me the numbers of those two bills in the legislature to highlight for this. So thank you very much. Christy and Amy, who unfortunately had microphone troubles, but gave you some tips on customer service. And they also drafted up a Word document with all of the tips that they gave. So you did not totally lose out. You will receive that. The late Fred Lindsay, because he's why we have all of these policies. And I wish that video would have played, because it's absolutely fascinating. And he was a very smart man. And Susan Metzger, she's been behind the scenes. She's going to help in these last 20 minutes. With addressing any questions anybody has. And finally, Andrea Wilson Anderson helped me with editing, along with Susan Metzger, the flow chart, which in its entirety is also in the handouts. And the reason why you haven't yet received them is because I've been so focused, hyper-focused on this and getting through it, that I haven't been able to get to my files to send them, to put them in the chat or anything, because I'm kind of frazzled. It's my first presentation, and oh my gosh, I actually made it. So you will get them, I promise. This link that says join me, I actually would love to have people in an Excel file who want to do these review committees, because we've already had one challenge that hasn't gone to the point of a form being filled out, but it almost did. And so I don't have anybody to call upon. I do have a physical link, because you cannot actually click on this link, I realized. So I do have a physical link that I can get to right now. And yes, so let me actually get to my links. I have my own little wee survey of 4 questions for you to do. I want to thank all of you for being here. Having so many people here means so much to me. You have no idea. And again, I made it. I've never done this before. So thank you. I see raised hands. I'm actually going to let Susan take over for just a moment while I grab the links first. So Susan.
Can
if
you stop
do-
sharing your screen so that way I can see all the raised hands
Yes,
easier?
absolutely. If it'll let me. There we go.
And somebody wanted to know if you could try showing that Linsecki video again, because they really wanted to see it. If you can get that to run, that would be great.
I had a quick question. So does visual art teachers showing books that we get from the EMC Educational Material Center that have nude pictures in it that are famous, and students, I tell them turn the page if you don't like what you're seeing when you're doing research on these famous artists. But what are we covered under the curriculum laws? That wasn't clear to me. If a parent is upset, so do they just fill out a form and say, my child cannot see this book, but the rest of the class can, and then we're covered under that? Or how does that work?
Right. So I'll go back to this slide here. Can you see it? Is it showing?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so right here, this is the one that applies to you. Because you are using library materials in the classroom. If talking to them doesn't, explaining that we have procedures in place, et cetera, doesn't work, and they still don't like what's going on, the parents would file a written complaint and request that their child be withdrawn from class. And then the principal sends a written reply to the parent within 3 business days. And that's kind of it. Yeah, you're pretty much covered.
But what if there's no class for the child to be transferred to?
That's a good question. Amy, Christy, do you have an answer for that one? Since I'm not a teacher, I don't have any experience in that regard.
The 7 years working at TUSD as a middle school student, I've only had one incident where a parent was upset that their child was looking at these pictures. And so before introducing the books and setting them on their centers to look at, I let them know, if you see something you're not comfortable with, turn the page. And to the student and the parent.
We just wanted to chime in. Can you hear me? This is Amy.
Yes.
Yes. We often told teachers that we're dealing with controversial materials, that if we pulled a cart of materials and students looked at those materials in the library, they were protected. Once materials are taken to the classroom, they're no longer protected under the library's Bill of Rights. And so that's just a sort of a tricky fine line there that, if you were looking at those art materials in the library, then you would have that complete protection.
Yeah, and also as an English teacher for 17 years at the high school level. Can you hear me now? Uh-oh. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as an English teacher, I taught Macbeth, and so I'd get out in front of it. And yes, there's some racy parts in the play, but also in the movie that I would show after we read Macbeth. And so I'd send home a parent permission form explaining what was in it, and every student had to sign off, get their parent to sign off before we could show the film. So getting out in front of it like that helps. I don't know if that helps you.
Okay, it looks like the Fred Linsecki video is going to play. So let's do that.
Speaking with you earlier about this, you were in the process of working with the legal department in TUSD, a man named
Fred Linzicki. Fred Linzicki was the administrator over the legal department at the time of this law enforcement person complaint. And so we started the process of what would be fair and equitable to basically give a book a trial.
Right.
Okay. Not to say that everything everyone ever chose is appropriate or at the right place or should have been purchased, but that every book or every piece of material would have a fair hearing.
Right.
And we were directed, of course, to the legal department. And Fred Linzicki, their administrator, worked with us through this process. And we thought we could combine curriculum and library into one group and do the process as one. And he kept saying, no, you can't, you don't understand, you can't, you can only do library. And we would keep circling back in later meetings to, well, why don't we just, and he never could explain clearly to me, and it took years before I understood why. But he was very clear that everything we were working on had to do with library and library alone. And he brought great wealth to the discussion. He was a stellar employee and a Rhodes Scholar. Mm-hmm. And he understood everything that we were doing and discussing and trying to make it as foolproof as possible. And the fact that it has survived 20-some years of complaints tells me that Mr. Linzicki, as the head of legal, knew exactly what he was doing.
Okay.
We have some questions, Kirsten.
Yes. All right. Ask away.
Okay, Mary Ann, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. I'm a high school theater teacher. And do the same rules apply to theater teachers who are choosing plays for their students that apply to English teachers who are choosing, books to read with their students?
I would guess so, Amy and Christy. See, I'm not certified, so I don't I don't have that expertise. Would
Yes.
you say, yes?
Those would be the same rules. Those would be curriculum and same rules as that slide that you showed previously, Kirsten.
So
Yeah.
basically, it's just broken down to two sides, the library side and curriculum. So if it's not library, everything else will fall under curriculum then, right?
Awesome, thank you very much.
Okay, Lupita, you have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm a library assistant at Wharton, which is the K through 5th school. This was before COVID, but I just want to know in case it happens again. I had a 5th grader who was reading at a 3rd grade level, and he was always getting, the lower level books. One day he decided to come up with a chapter book. It was pretty long, and he said, I really want to try this book, Ms. Lupita. So I checked it out to him. The following week, the parent came in and said that his child was not allowed to read chapter books. Well, at that moment, I was saying, okay, and the child was very disappointed. So I was like in the middle because I'm like, he wanted to try it. The parent said no. So what would I do if that happened again?
Yeah. So that's a really tough one because I'm kind of on the side of the kid, but you got to go with the parents. So, I mean, I would put a note in the child's patron record, the patron note field. But honestly, you can't stop the child from reading in the stacks. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you cut off.
I'm saying you can't stop the child from reading in the stacks, while they're in the library. You can only stop them from checking out a book.
Okay. That's good to know.
So, I mean, that's your way of complying and still helping the child who wants to read, who wants to explore and exercise their freedoms. And that's what I would do. Like, you got a job to do. You're at your desk, so it's like you can't police all of their actions, but you can stop them from checking out.
Okay. So if that would happen again, I would just tell them, just read it here and then, or leave it with me if you want to continue. Is that what you're saying? And not have them check it out?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because that's what I did with the one student at Valencia, is I was like, your mom said you can't check these books out. Well, can I read it here? I said, I won't tell anybody.
Okay. I see. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Elvie, you have a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My question is for two books that I had received as a donation. Now, they're not in the system, but they were highly questionable. One of them was controversial. This is before I knew all of this. I went to the principal and it was donated by a teacher. The teacher was unaware of the contents of the story. And like I said, I took it up with Dr. Loya. And we decided, it's probably not appropriate for the level of elementary. So my question is that okay? And the second one was during the COVID shutdown. And I was going through some books that were donated from a parent. Well, apparently there was one that did show nudity, but it was I guess it was sort of in a scientific way, how we grow up. And so I thought, well, I would have to speak to someone about this. And I did. And we decided, it's probably not good.
I didn't hear that very last bit. Sorry.
Oh, the second book. It was during the COVID shutdown. A parent had given me a bunch of books for donations. And I looked through all of them. And one of them I did see there was a lot of nudity. And it was sort of it was like in a scientific way. It's how we grow up from children to adults. But I still felt like I should talk about it to someone before cataloging it. And say, well, no, probably not a good idea. So we just made that decision. So my question is for these two books, is that the appropriate way?
So a great tool that I've used and a great thing that everyone can do, because we all have access to Destiny, we kind of have access to everyone's catalog. When you go to the main screen, the catalog search bar, underneath, instead of just your school, you can select all TUSD. So you can look up these particular books, see if they're even in the district, and see if they're at, in your case, any other elementary schools. If they are, that's your justification for adding it, if you want to. If you're like, hey, this might actually be a good resource, like in the sense of the one with nudity, but it's a scientific, like, I want to say it's a 612 probably in the Dewey Decimal, biology and how our bodies grow. That might be a good resource, especially if you don't have any other books in that. Generally it's more along, middle school age where we see those books. But if other elementary schools have that particular book, then you're justified because it's already here. You know what I mean? But if no other elementary schools do, and you're seeing it at the middle and high school, you're probably right in saying this should go elsewhere. On the other hand, every school community is different. And so you got to judge by who all of your kids are. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not talking about these books in particular now. I'm just talking about when donations come in. Any book could be somebody's book. You know what I mean? Like that one child who is a reluctant reader, and it's like, that's their book. That's the book that's going to get them to start reading. You know, so I would also encourage you with any books that you're kind of waffling on, is there a particular child or group of children in your school for whom this might, you know, work with, or a teacher? Maybe one of your teachers is doing a lesson that goes beyond what curriculum says they're supposed to teach, but maybe they're doing a lesson that these would go for, and maybe you would, hey, would you like these books? You know, there are ways around it. I wouldn't automatically say no. I like to find the merit first, and then you know, look at it at all angles, if you will, different perspectives. But I would go to Destiny first and see if it's anywhere in the district and where it is. And that would be my first guess, if you will.